Today, I know we're going to hear from a number of inspiring founders and innovators about their businesses and how they're solving some of the biggest challenges to internet connectivity and access across the continent. But I was asked to speak to you for a moment before we hear from them about the Biden administration's agenda for ICT infrastructure and some of our key priorities. I'm also going to focus on our commitment to whole of government approaches and discuss support for Prosper Africa. So getting us started here, as you are aware, the Biden-Harris administration inherited a number of challenges, and those include we came into office at a moment of historic challenges, which include a global pandemic, a crushing economic downturn, a crisis of racial injustice, and a deepening climate crisis and emergency. Our top focus over the first 6 months has been addressing these crises and building back better. We are engaging Africa as part of our broader response to partnerships and rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Pardon me. In President Biden's message to the African Union, he said the United States is ready to partner in solidarity, support, and mutual respect. Our approach to partnership is evident in our commitment to bolster U.S.-Africa trade and investment and to promote an agenda that is affirmative towards the African continent. This approach includes a newly reimagined Prosper Africa strategy, which aligns with the strategic priorities of our interim national security guidance. And it also includes expanded U.S. economic engagement with the private sector, African youth, women entrepreneurs, and civil society. Building African capacity and providing economic opportunities for the American middle class, including African diaspora communities, is another key component of our trade and investment policy agenda. We're also committed to advancing President's Build Back Better World commitment to support African economies emerge from the ongoing shock of COVID-19. Prosper Africa is the centerpiece for advancing U.S.-Africa trade and investment. Through a true two-way trade and investment partnership, the U.S. government is committed to advancing sustainable growth across the African continent and supporting economic recovery at home as all of our nations build back better together. Prosper Africa brings together the full suite of U.S. trade and investment support services to provide U.S. and African businesses and investors with market insights, deal support, and financing opportunities. And since 2019, the U.S. government has helped to close 500 deals across 44 African countries for an estimated total value of 47 billion deals in new exports and investment. U.S. investments under Prosper Africa follow an affirmative development model. They contribute to local job creation, enhance transparency, spur local economic development, citizen empowerment, climate smart solutions, and improve labor and environmental standards. In the digital infrastructure sector, the United States government comparative advantages our mission presence across the continent, including through mechanisms such as Prosper Africa, Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership, and our Deal Teams initiative. The State Department and USAID work together as co-chairs of the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Initiative on the development of ICT infrastructure. We promote transparent regulatory policies for open and competitive markets. And specifically, we work across 4 key pillars. The first is building connections by promoting investments in secure, pro-competitive ICT infrastructure. Second, we advance an open internet by promoting inclusive, rights-respecting, multi-stakeholder models of internet governance and pro-competitive, pro-innovation digital economy policies and regulations. We grow global markets for US ICT goods and services, especially high-quality, interoperable, and secure ICT equipment, software, and services. We're also working to enhance cybersecurity. As you know, economic development does not occur in silos. On the African continent, as elsewhere around the globe, The regulatory and operating environment underpins all aspects of digital transformation, and it is key to unlocking economic growth potential. That's why we're training ICT telecommunications makers in sub-Saharan Africa, the policymakers in the areas of 5G, open radio access networks, spectrum allocation and cybersecurity, and fostering regulatory harmonization and best practices as we support them with technical assistance. We are also supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area and seeking to expand commercial cooperation with businesses of all sizes. This lies at the core of our U.S. trade and commercial engagement with Africa. And these capacity building activities support competitive telecommunications and ICT ecosystems and help to foster enabling regulatory environments. I'd like to just highlight a little bit about the power of partnerships. In the technology sector, we see an increasing number of U.S. tech, entertainment, and angel partners investing in or seeking to invest in bankable deals across the African continent. U.S. firms are competitive in multiple African markets, including digital payment systems, technology inputs, e-service, e-commerce platforms, e-health. And we are committed to supporting American businesses by providing the tools that they need to compete in Africa's digital economy while creating jobs at home. Strengthening our global partnerships is a critical step towards achieving these goals. Our Office of Global Partnerships works with U.S. embassies to build partnership opportunity delegations to explore a wide range of collaboration opportunities and foster deeper cooperation between the United States, countries of strategic importance, and the private sector. As a central component of the State Department's mandate, commercial diplomacy efforts help U.S. companies compete on a level playing field in a fair process for export and investment opportunities. And key to our commercial diplomacy efforts, the state-led Deal Team Initiative brings a whole of government resources and insights to help U.S. companies win deals and to sustain job creation. Thanks to Prosper Africa, U.S. investors can now assess active deals in the new Prosper Africa virtual deal room, along with tools that businesses and investors can use to identify and advance opportunities. I hope I've convinced you that across multiple lines of effort, the Biden administration is committed to expanding digital connectivity and access in Africa, and we see tremendous opportunity to harness the considerable potential for accelerating digital transformation. We're also developing a Digital Africa initiative to help African partners digitize and monetize their technology architectures. Prosper Africa's growth strategy looking ahead is firmly rooted in actively engaging and supporting our country's vibrant African diaspora. Their indispensable talents as entrepreneurs, job creators, exporters, data scientists, and their networks are absolutely critical for advancing and supporting a shared prosperity agenda. We're already seeing early results. For example, with Prosper Africa support, Dr. Thierry Wanju, CEO of CyberStation, partnered with Cisco on a cybersecurity initiative in Burkina Faso, and we are excited about facilitating a lot more of this at scale. In addition, targeted engagement and technical assistance for small and medium enterprises will be a key part of our future approach. I look forward to hearing from our tech founders today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brion, for those amazing remarks and just insight to the U.S. government and also the support that the U.S. Department of State has been as a Prosper Africa partner. As you all have, as she has mentioned, the U.S. Department of State is an active partner of Prosper Africa and is one of the 17 participating agencies. In 2019, the U.S. government launched the embassy deal teams across the continent, led by U.S. ambassadors, driven by the U.S. Department of State and U.S. Department of Commerce. These deal teams work with Prosper Africa, deal team in Washington, to deliver a whole of government trade and investment package to U.S. and African companies. So we are pleased to have you join us today, Brion. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to introduce our next keynote speaker, Andil Naba, founder and executive chairman of Convergence Partners Investments, who is no stranger to the digital infrastructure sector in Africa. He established Convergence Partners in 2006 as an impact investment holding and private equity firm focusing on technology around the African continent. Andil, it is a pleasure to have you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate to be invited in this very important event. Can you hear me clearly?
We hear you great.
Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege again to share my thoughts and experiences in this platform organized by Prosper Africa and various agencies and the Department of State and USAID. Thank you again for inviting us. And just to attest as an example that we are one of the organizations as convergence partners that have been working with a number of US companies over many, many years, decades, if I may say. I mean, the latest few examples I will highlight just before I start to share my thoughts is that we worked with USAID in Liberia, for instance, in putting fiber at C-Squared. C-Squared is a joint venture between IFC and Google, Convergence Partners, and Mutsuhi. We build fiber in a number of countries such as Uganda, Ghana, and Liberia, and many other countries. And that's one example. A second example is Sicom. Sicom is a subsea cable, which is today we are the largest submarine cable carrier in the eastern seaboard of Africa in the Indian Ocean. At the time of us putting Sicom together, thanks to USAID, who was there with us in the conceptualization and doing the market study. I mean, today, Sicom, as I've said, is one of the largest carriers of traffic connecting most of the countries in the eastern seaboard to Europe and in Asia. The third example is we built a satellite together with Intelsat, and that satellite basically is still operational, covering most parts of the African continent. The satellite was built in Washington, D.C., and by scientific, one of the top companies that build satellites. Basically, it's a geostationary satellite covering most parts of the African continent. The examples are many. I can go on, but again, thank you very much for inviting me. Africa has 1.3 billion people. We are blessed the fact that we have what we define as a demographic dividend, youth. We are almost a continent with over, I would say, of that 1.3 billion people, over 65% of these people are young people, right? The ITU, the World Bank have identified that the world between now and 2030, to build the digital infrastructure, we need about 428 billion. $100 billion of that is needed in Africa between now and 2030 to build the digital infrastructure. What do I mean by digital infrastructure? Data centers, subsea cables, optic fiber, connectivity and access, wireless, 5G, and many others. So we are looking forward to work with a lot of US companies that are both here and those that are already familiar with the African continent in this journey towards 2030 and addressing, SDGs, as we say. Africa is in need of optic fiber to the tune of about 400,000 kilometers to be able to connect every small town, every city into the backbone of the internet. We are, again, must be thankful to Google for Equiano, which again, as I've said, Google is our partner at C-Squared. Equiano is being built to connect most of the West Coast countries into the global internet ecosystem. Similarly, we are thankful to Facebook for 2Africa cable. That is, again, undersea cable of about 180 terabits per second, connecting most parts of the coast of the African continent. So these are just few examples of US companies involved in the continent. I must also talk about AWS has built a hyperscale data center in Cape Town, which is one of the largest data centers that we have seen in the continent. We are very excited about all these investments. However, we need more investments, again, to work with some of the mid-size and SMMEs, both from the US side and from the Africa side. Not only to build the bulk infrastructure, but to build applications and services to make sure that we can be able to provide our people with fintech services, with agri-tech services, with medtech services, and be able to make sure that every corner of the African continent is connected onto the internet. So we really are appreciating to work with a number of agencies and in the development of future regulations for 5G. Again, thanks to USAID, USTDA, and a number of others who really have worked with us in the drive for development of 5G and the release of spectrum for 5G in order for Africa to be in the cutting edge in building 5G. We are working with the Linux Foundation, from California, to make sure that we adopt open source in both open radio access network and also generally in the building of a number of platforms for growth in the African continent. Thanks to the Linux Foundation colleagues that are very supportive to the work that we do. As the Digital Council, which is one of the bodies that I'm a president of in the continent, which is a body of a number of companies involved in technology, i.e. from mobile to fiber to applications to data center. We are really working with a number of institutions in the US to make sure that we can create, that bridge in the data center space, in the 5G environment, in the cloud environment, and also building optic fiber. Companies such as Corning, we work and talk to them on a regular basis as companies who are leading in the optic fiber environment. So I just want to also mention that in about 2019, the Broadband Commission met in Menlo Park in the campus of Facebook, where the Giga Project was developed. Giga Project is about connecting schools in the world. It's about connecting basically schools in the number and mapping schools and finding investment models to connect schools in different parts of the world, and in particular in the African continent. As a team, as one of the members that participated in that project that was led by Broadband Commission, the ITU, and a number of other stakeholders. Today we talk about, models such as the connectivity credits, to be able to learn from, for instance, carbon credits. How can we bring such models in this industry of the digital infrastructure? How can we create an environment, we build this infrastructure using green technologies? How can we make sure that the digital infrastructure that we build in Africa is basically for impact? Again, thanks to Prosper Africa and a number of other agencies and organizations that are working with us in addressing such needs today. I just want to, as I conclude, that there is a debate that we are talking about currently called the digital bonds. How do we create digital bonds in order to build digital infrastructure in Africa? I know that organizations such as UNICEF and the ITU are busy, and the World Bank are busy looking at how these models could work. And we really are excited in the continent to make sure that we can be able to participate in creating the digital infrastructure towards 2030, where we can be able to connect every child, every school, every village, and making sure that SMMEs in Africa, entrepreneurs in Africa, are able to drive this continent in the creation of what we call the fourth industrial revolution. Again, thank you very much, colleagues. I just want to wish you a very, very good and a successful event. I can see in the deal room great companies that are here, and I'm looking forward to participate in this event and be able to continue with deals and working with a number of US companies beyond today. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Andil. Just really insightful, and it's really great to hear some of the work that you're doing, but also the data around, what's needed, and from an investment perspective to help close that digital divide gap. So now I would like to turn it over just for a brief moment to our Acting Chief Operating Officer, Leslie Marbury.
Hi, Toyin. Hi, everybody. I apologize. I didn't join for the welcoming remarks. I was noting the irony, having a little bit of technical difficulties, but very happy to be here and be a part of this and see these inspiring businesses that are really right now on the virtual deal room. I was interested in what was the earlier speaker was just talking about, and just wanted to give a little background on that. I know that this is something USAID was really proud of, to coming in Liberia after the Ebola outbreak in 2014, 2016. When USAID launched this first of kind partnership with C Squared and Google, I think in 2017, to really bring that high speed metro fiber communications infrastructure into Monrovia. It was a 12 million cash and in-kind 50-50 co-investment between C Squared and USAID, and it really connects the government offices, health clinics, and businesses to high-speed internet for the first time. So this is something we were really proud of, to work with C Squared, which likely would leave the country without this, without which the country may not have had that connectivity. So thank you for mentioning that. And thanks again, Toyin, for giving me a moment just to say hello, everybody, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we'll keep this conversation going. And now to the other good part of our discussion. So we're going to begin our connectivity panel. So to start off, I just want to share a little bit of background, but a recent report by McKinsey & Company on Africa in the wake of COVID-19 suggests that to expedite Africa's economic recovery beyond the pandemic, the continent will need to accelerate its digital transformation. The expansion of digital offerings can foster an enabling environment for rapid digitization, make access for all more achievable, and speed up more infrastructure investments in the sector. As previously mentioned, we are seeing U.S. investments in this sector, but we know that there's still so much more to go and so many more opportunities. And so with that being said, let's get this conversation started. So please meet Andy Beard. He is the CEO of Vanu, Martin Lucy, CEO of Surfline Communications Ghana, and Jeffrey Oketeo, CEO of Ubuntu Towers. These three amazing founders are leading digital infrastructure companies and are featured on the Prosper Africa virtual deal room. So I will start this session with you, Andy. Founded in 1998, Vanu is a global provider of turnkey mobile communications solutions that allow MNOs to serve off-grid markets. Vanu helps close the digital divide by providing cellular mobile connectivity to remote, off-the-grid markets that have not had opportunities to seize the economic, social, and cultural advantages generated by cellular coverage. Built to minimize costs for power, backhaul and maintenance, Vanu's equipment, services, and tools enable MNOs to provide off-grid coverage profitably. Vanu also developed the Anywave base station. Anywave was the first software-defined radio certified by the U.S. Federal Communications Commission. So my first question for you, Andy, is after expanding Vanu's operations into India, why did the company choose Africa, specifically East Africa, as its next investment destination?
Thank you, Toyin. And before I get going on my response, I just wanted to say thank you to Prosper Africa and to USAID and the Department of State for gathering this panel together, convening this. It's a great opportunity, and very pleased to have like-minded individuals discussing some of the problems that we encounter in developing digital connectivity solutions for Africa. So why Africa? It's a great question, and to fully answer that, I need to give you a little bit of context about who we are and what we do, and you gave some of the background, but I wanted to emphasize a couple of key points. We work with mobile network operators in partnership with operators and local partners, creating a platform by which we can create connectivity in off-grid markets. And this really requires a combination of technical and business model innovations. The business model innovations relate to enabling investment in off-grid markets and doing so profitably. And the technical innovations relate to something that Andil mentioned during his talk and was also mentioned previously by Brion, which is creating open and transparent interfaces within digital communications equipment and making sure that we're doing Open RAN implementations to reduce the cost of delivering service into these markets. So with that context, the reason that Africa is so appealing to us is that it's a huge market for us. There are a lot of people in Africa who fit into the category of off-grid markets. And not only is it big, it's growing. And as Andil mentioned, it's a huge opportunity in terms of the demographics. When you look at the youth of Africa, that means there are a bunch of people who are going to be aging into the category of needing digital connectivity solutions to be able to maximize their potential, not only in terms of employment and communications capabilities, but also in terms of all of the things that we do using digital connectivity. So remote education, e-health, e-governance, e-commerce, financial inclusion. These are all things that are either enabled or facilitated by having connectivity, and off-grid markets are especially in need because of the lack of infrastructure in those markets. Very frequently, a digital connectivity or digital connection is really the only way that they're going to be able to access these types of services and to level the playing field and to make sure that they get engaged in the economy. So that's why we've really focused on Africa. The demand is very high need, but it's a big market and rapidly growing. So we're very excited to be part of the market.
Thank you for that background and just also giving us that insight to, VANU and its expansion and what needs to happen next. So I'm going to turn it over next to Martin from Surfline Communications, and there'll probably be some more questions at the Q&A session, so just hang tight. So Surfline Communications, first to launch 4G LTE data services in Ghana in 2014. Surfline is a telecom company which provides high-speed broadband services to individual consumers and businesses within Accra, Tema, and Takoradi areas in Ghana. The company launched with the largest number of cell sites for 4G business in Africa and currently has about 277 sites in Ghana. Surfline offers various data bundle plans to different customer segments, including a limited bundle and a limited night bundle. The company sells its services through three main channels: mobile money, My Surfline portal, and physical Surfline stores. So Martin, tell us more about Surfline Communications' strategy to address the internet in the various parts of Ghana, rural versus urban city centers.
Yeah, thank you, Toyan. Also, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this forum. Yeah, as you mentioned before, we are currently operating mainly in the coastal areas of Ghana. And our strategy is to first and foremost also expand to other, let's say, economic centers of gravity. One of them being Kumasi, which is further inland. When you talk about the more rural areas, which are definitely also very important, what we do follow is actually what we call a dual data strategy. It is dual data because on one hand, we're talking about serving very highly densely populated areas, which are the urban areas. And on the other hand, we are also talking...
Martin, I hate to interrupt you, but it looks like your camera's off. Can you turn it on?
Yeah, I think I have a... Sorry, my computer is actually complaining about bandwidth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which that it says actually that I have a bandwidth problem and that therefore something doesn't work quite well. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, we're so sorry. I knew it was working earlier today. Okay.
Yeah.
Apologies. Okay, well, keep going.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, because it's quite embarrassing because even I'm not even at the moment in Ghana. I'm actually in the Netherlands, you know, but on a not very good connection apparently. So going back to the urban and rural strategies. So what we do is we have this dual data strategy, which basically means we look at very densely populated urban areas. For the more rural areas, part of our strategy is to work with solutions that are very cost effective because most of the African territories are what we call low ARPU countries, so they have a very low average revenue per user. And that also means that the business model needs to be sort of like dimensioned around that. So what we need is very low-cost solutions, for the radio infrastructure. And it's not only the radio infrastructure itself, but it's also we need to have low-cost solutions for the towers that we use and also the backhaul, which are also part of the infrastructure. We run a very asset-light model, which basically means that we do not own our own towers, but we share that actually with other players. And that does enable us actually to have a very efficient operating model. But what we also do is we are talking actually to other players in the market to do infrastructure sharing. Because as an industry, what we need to be doing, we need to manage essentially the return on capital employed. Because the key thing in this industry is that the return on capital employed is higher than the weighted average cost of capital. And that is, of course, important for investors so that actually they get a return on the investment. And that is what we have built into our business plan, ways to do that. I hope that that answers the question.
Thank you. Definitely does, and also gives us, like I said, a little bit more background as to how you're addressing those challenges in the various different parts of the country. As we know, you have your urban centers and your rural areas as well, but the opportunities and how that impacts other sectors, access to connectivity is very, very important. So thank you for that. I'm going to now turn this conversation over to Jeffrey of Ubuntu Towers. So a little bit about Ubuntu Towers. It is a developer and operator of passive infrastructure and tower sites across the whole of Uganda with the ambition to expand into other East African markets. The target customers are mobile telecommunication operators. Ubuntu Towers provides a range of services including rooftop sites, in-built solutions, street pole sites, and greenfield sites. So Jeffrey, you have extensive experience in the digital infrastructure sector, working with a variety of foreign-based organizations that are investing in this sector and setting up towers throughout the continent. How has this experience shaped your understanding about the sector, specifically in Africa, and how did that lead to you starting Ubuntu Towers?
Thank you very much, Toyin. My appreciation to Prosper Africa, Department of State, and USAID for hosting me and Ubuntu Towers. Right to your question, the digital infrastructure sector is highly driven by changes in the telecommunication market. There's been a lot of evolution in terms of technology from 1G to currently 6G. The telecommunication market has also driven a lot of devices, talk of computers, chipsets, handheld devices, mobile phones, applications, social communication, WeChat, WhatsApp, usability of AI, and it continues to break boundaries in terms of communication. Over the years, I've noticed that technology has definitely influenced our daily lives. If you look at the current pandemic, you will notice that there's been an upsurge in terms of a requirement of telecommunications, people working from home. And this experience has actually noted is that it has made telecommunications more of an important utility in our lives. And for communication to reach the intended users, there must be propagation of passive infrastructure, and that is where Ubuntu comes in. As you've ably said, we deal directly with the telecom companies to ensure that we give them coverage in areas where they don't have availability, and we also grow or increase capacity in terms of areas that are congested, be it in terms of network, both voice and data. The driving factors, that led us to start Ubuntu Towers are actually numerous, and it depends on different clients and what they are trying to look out for, or different entrepreneurs. If you're to look at what Andy and Andile have already shared, the population demographics are one of the key driving factors in terms of where, a towerco would want to expand. Things to do with stability of currency, mobile penetration in the market, which Andile spoke quite deeply about. You also need to look at the growth pattern in terms of technology vis-a-vis the coverage of the landmass. Power penetration, that was also earlier on spoken about in terms of, I think by Andy, in terms of, the grid penetration in the different regions in Africa, political stability, and revenue per user, as Martin has just said, our previous speaker. So that is really what drove Ubuntu to start as a business. And clearly, those are one of the major drivers for most of the towercos in this market. Thank you.
Thank you. So that wraps up our first, the first round of questions that I have. So my question for all of you here today is, there's been a perception that starting a business in Africa is impossible and too much of a risk, but you have chosen Africa as a place to do business. And so I want to just ask each one of you, if you could tell us why you chose Africa, and what message do you have for U.S. investors looking for opportunities in this sector on the continent? So I will start with you, Andrew, and then go to Martin, and then back to you, Jeffrey.
Sure, thanks, Toyin. I guess for us, this overlaps a little bit with the earlier question in terms of, why are we in Africa? It's a huge market, and the gap of people who don't have internet access and connectivity is a major driver. And so that's the motivation for being there. But the answering the question of, well, what about the risks? How do you get comfortable with this kind of stuff? I think one of the things that makes this particular group of companies, I think, a little bit unique is the focus on telecommunications. And the great thing about being in the telecommunications market is that the risks are mitigated in many respects, because when you're talking about telecommunications, it's a utility, right? And it's a really important utility for a lot of people for the reasons we mentioned earlier. It's a lifeline. It's an access. Literally, it can be a lifeline, but it's also important access for employment and other sort of essential daily activities. And so the risk that demand dries up and goes away is very small. It may end up being problematic with respect to a particular customer and that particular customer's ability to pay. But the great thing about running a telecommunications network is you've got the law of large numbers working in your favor. So on average, month over month, what we see in our networks is growing demand. The more people use telecommunications, the more they want to use it. The more applications they find that drive an ROI for that individual, return on investment for that individual when they're spending money on airtime with their mobile network operator. They're doing it because they're getting something back that's very important to them. So these numbers have panned out across all markets, and we feel really confident that there is no country that does not need help in providing additional coverage. And the combination of the companies that you have here is actually a great example of the ecosystem, each of us doing our own thing, but working together, we can certainly do a lot to address those challenges. So in terms of the risks, yes, there are risks, and there are risks that arise, but not really out of the business model side of things. The only thing I would say is that when we choose the model, for any company that's looking at this or any investor looking at a company who's investing in the market, for us, what was really important is refining the model, getting it working on a small scale, and then replicating that. And then you've got not only replicate it, but also adapt it as you go into different markets, because there are differences country to country. There are different, just from a mobile perspective, there are different rates that are applicable in different countries because of the taxation and regulatory backdrop. And that actually changes user behavior in terms of how many minutes of use that they use in a given month. And so that changes the revenue profile. It also changes calling behavior. There's a phenomenon known as beeping, where somebody will place a call and then hang up before the call is completed. And that's a signal to somebody else to call them back. And so understanding some of these dynamics and the implications from a revenue perspective end up being really important. So that's why it's important from our view to start small, refine the model, and then you can expand from there. So I guess I'll be quiet and I'll give the others a chance to talk about some of the risks they've encountered. But those are some of the things that were really important for us.
Thanks, Andy. And I know I asked this question, but I got another question in. And so Martin and Jeffrey, if you could also touch on this, but, what has been your biggest challenges also in this process, because you decided to start your business in Africa, but what has been your biggest challenge in attracting U.S. investment along the way? So that's the other little curveball I'm going to throw in there for you guys.
So who should go?
Yes, go ahead, Martin, and then we'll turn to you, Jeffrey.
All right, thank you, Diane. Yeah, what has been the biggest challenge? What I find always rather challenging, actually, when you talk to investors, is that they all seem to look for guarantees, which I find rather intriguing, because if you look at the nature of our business, we create value, obviously, when we attract customers that are spending money with us. And Surfline actually is on a growth path, and we have very stiff growth objectives. But whether or not we are going to achieve that is all depending, of course, on our marketing and sales activities. And I think we're doing the right thing. And the numbers so far prove that we're doing the right thing. But of course, I cannot provide any evidence that that is going to stay like that, because also there's uncertainties, like what are competitors going to do. My story with investors is always, and I'm specifically talking about the market in Ghana, where we are active, is that there is like a huge growth potential in the market. The market in Ghana for telecommunications and user services last year was an estimated value of 1.6 billion US, and it's going to grow to an estimated double the size, or 3.5 billion US in 2030. So that is a growth rate of more than 10% per year. So that's very interesting. And that's also, that's also indeed the right observation, that perhaps Africa is one of the few continents in the world where there is still a lot of growth. And it's, of course, because of population growth, but also growth actually in spending power. And definitely the place to be. If you will, the national regulator in Ghana published last year that only 17% of households have internet access at home. So basically everybody is using mobile phones. There's a lot of people that use their mobile phones. But if you want to connect, let's say, with a PC or with a tablet, it's very convenient also to just have regular internet at home. And we have seen in the COVID times that also kids, even in Ghana, they needed actually to follow lessons at school. And so people working from home. So there's definitely a need for that. So again, what is the reason to invest? Yeah, it's basically the growth opportunity and the need also, let's say, for the market to develop its digital infrastructure. This is stolen from one of our competitors, but at the end of the day, it's very simple. If you have access to the internet, you have access to knowledge. You have therefore then also access to education. You have then access also to jobs and access to the ability, to build a better life and, get jobs and build up wealth. And that is, of course, what Africa needs. And if you literally talk about Prosper Africa, then I think the telecommunications infrastructure is definitely an enabling factor actually to drive that prosperity, and that's where we play a role.
Thank you, Martin. And yes, if we talk about Prosper Africa, these are definitely the places that we are working towards to make sure that we play that impactful role in closing that digital divide and driving U.S. investors into the various markets across the countries in Africa. So, Jeffrey, I will let you take this last question. Well, actually, there may be one more that I'm seeing in the chat, but I'll let you go ahead and answer now.
Okay, I will start with the challenge that we faced as Ubuntu. I think it took us close to 9 months to be able to get a funder who would rightly, be interested in our business. Even with all the potential that we showed, it is normally very difficult for most of the funders to kind of look at the opportunity that we had, in a more, how would I put it, in a more sort of structured manner. And I will speak to that in terms of, why we then decided to invest in Africa. And, and second of all, the challenge in terms of being able to convince most of these funders of the opportunity that is available, even given the numbers, as Martin has clearly shared. If you're to look at the market where we operate in Uganda, the fiber to home is actually under about 2%. So there's a lot of potential to grow that market to a much bigger, compared to other geographical areas. We also have now a very high interest in terms of renewable energy, which is an area that is also growing. So if you're to look at most of the businesses and where they are going, it is easy for investors to try and look out for potentials in where they can put their money. To answer on the question to do with why we chose to invest in Africa, I would like to take on, a couple of quotes. One by Dangote, where he said that Africa is the fastest growing economic region in the world, and it is the right place to invest. And another by Paul Kagame, where he said the opportunity, if you're to look at it, to raise the quality of life is the biggest business opportunity there is. So from what Andy has said and what Martin has said, you can clearly see that there is a lot of potential in Africa in terms of telecommunication. That said, if you're to look at the recent activity, especially in the tower sector, just a couple of days ago, there was an announcement by Airtel Africa for its sale of towers in Madagascar and Malawi to Helios Towers, about another potential of 1,000 towers that they want to do through an MOU in Chad and Gabon. Helios as well has put together about $200 million to invest in a 5-year period in Senegal. We also recently saw, actually last month, towards the end of last month, Paradigm and SBA Communications, which is an American company, acquire 1,400 towers in Airtel Tanzania, an investment of 1 million, of 175 million. That shows that really there is potential for opportunities in Africa. That demystifies the analogy that it is impossible to invest in Africa. There is opportunity with MTN Group. I think it appointed an advisor to look at a lease and sell and lease back model for their 13,000 towers that are in South Africa. So yes, there are risks in business, but as Andy has said, there are certain key things that you can look out for. And in the tower sector, it's a very highly regularized sector that has key requirements. And if these key requirements are fulfilled, it makes it easy for an investor to come in. You need to have an operating license. You need to have an off-take agreement. You need to have experienced people in that sector. Most of the founders actually do have skin in the game, but some of the challenges we experience with investors is that when it comes to valuation, valuing IP is very difficult. Valuing things to do with off-take agreements, ability to get a license, and showing the little skin that you have put in the game makes it a challenge for most of the investors to meet the entrepreneurs halfway. Yeah, so yeah, that is it for me, Toyin.
Thank you. Wow. Just looking at the time, we have come to time. And as I said early on, this is going to be a dynamic conversation, and just all the insight that we have received from just different people and their various perspectives, but all, coming down to, the need and importance for more investments in the digital infrastructure space on the continent. And of course, the opportunities. And so on behalf of the Prosper Africa Secretariat, I would like to thank you all for your time today and joining us in this discussion, and just being a part of this, as we, play a leading role in helping transform the sector on the continent and the various opportunities for growth, for economic growth and advancement in Africa through digital infrastructure and digital connectivity. Thank you to our panelists and our keynote speakers, Brion Dawson and Andil Ngaba, for your valuable insights. And also to our 3 panelists today, Martin, Andy, and Jeffrey, wishing you all the best on the Prosper Africa Virtual Deal Room, and also as you expand your businesses. And in closing, I encourage everyone who is here to visit ProsperAfrica.gov to learn more about this initiative, and also to register for the deal room to see our the various businesses and the various opportunities that are on there. So thank you all. Again, visit ProsperAfrica.gov. Have a great day. Bye-bye.